So good morning. My name is Amy Hale. I am a member of the 4 p.m. So I don't know most of you, but I'm delighted to be able to come and talk to you today about this topic of spiritual gifts that we have been working on these last few weeks. In my day job, I am a pediatric psychologist. And before I became a psychologist, though, I earned my graduate degree in theology, and so I've been wrestling with some of these questions of suffering and what do humans do with suffering and how do we deal with pain actually for about the last 10 years. And I was so excited to have the opportunity to come and to talk a little bit today about this place where sometimes we as humans experience pain in the midst of what is in fact a very good gift of God. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to jump right in. Put your seatbelts on, and we're going to go. So first of all, let me clarify one thing. The gifts that God has given are good gifts. God himself is a good God. Newsflash, we are broken people. Our church is a broken place. We live in a broken world. And there are times when our own brokenness or the brokenness of the people around us or just the brokenness of the world itself for no one's specific fault, that friction creates pain, both inside of each of us and in our communities. And so it's that pain that we are talking about today. But I want to be very clear that the gifts themselves and the giver of the gifts is not the one who causes the pain. This is more the problem that happens afterwards. So my goal today is to be able to talk through and to navigate how do we solve these problems? What do we do when there's pain related to the gifts? My goal is to give you a template for how to work through this, not to provide quick and easy answers. And I want you to be thinking about this not as, great, we've ticked that box, I'm glad we solved those problems, we're in great shape. No, this is probably going to be the start of a conversation. And so I'd encourage you to be thinking about how can we continue this as a body? Where can we go from here? So that's where we're going today. Now, what do we mean by there are sometimes problems related to spiritual gifts? I don't know how many of you have experienced this, but I know in my own group and in hearing other groups discussing, some of you have filled out the survey and have discovered, in fact, you have no spiritual gifts based on the number that you have. Some of you, I'm not saying that's true, just saying that's what the number said. Some of you have thought, you know what, I thought I had this gift and the survey says I don't. Or maybe you said, oh, I'm so glad I have this gift, and the people around you are saying, well, maybe take that with a grain of salt. Hard to say. These are all places where there can be confusion and disappointment, and these are the places that we're talking about, okay? So there are 3 steps we're going to go through. First one, we need to acknowledge where there's pain. We need to acknowledge where there's disappointment, frustration. We need to look at it honestly. Second one, we need to discern together. What do we do with this? What's going on here? Third, we need to take action. It does us no good at all if we recognize the problem and we talk about the problem and then we do nothing about the problem. So I'm going to walk through a little bit about what each of those looks like. The very first one is acknowledging that there even is a problem. How many of you remember the story of the emperor's new clothes? Children's story, right? 2 weavers come to town and they tell the emperor, hey, we've got this great outfit we're going to make for you, but if you're really stupid, you won't be able to see it. And he, in fact, is naked at the end of putting on the outfit. And everyone around him is really, really reluctant to say, you have no clothes on, because they don't want to appear stupid. They don't want to appear dumb. And it takes a little child who says, actually, you're naked. We, I think, can sometimes fall into that trap of the emperor's new clothes related to spiritual gifts. We can be afraid or we can be reluctant. We don't want to seem like complainers to say, hey, something doesn't feel right about this. I'm struggling with this. We don't want to appear dumb. We don't want to appear less spiritual than other people. We need to really get rid of that. We need to just walk honestly and openly into the places where things are not feeling right and we need to address that. Now, what do I mean by not feeling right? It's not just an icky feeling here. I want us to look really concretely. What you're looking for is the fruit of the Spirit. If there is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, all of those fruits of the Spirit, that's where the Spirit is in action. That's where his gifts are being used well. If those things are not in evidence, then that would suggest that he is not fully present. And that would suggest that that is a place that we need to attend to, we need to listen, we need to say, okay, how can I follow you more, God? So we're gonna look a little bit more at that action piece in a moment, but keep that in mind. We're looking for the fruit of the Spirit. I would say that in itself is actually a fairly simple step, right? Anybody can look and say, is this a place where we're experiencing love? Both internally and as a community. So where there's friction, that's not a sign of the Spirit's presence. Where there is pain, where there is hurting, where people are bickering back and forth, not a sign of the Spirit's presence. Where there is support and love and care and nurturing, yes, good news, Spirit is present there. So we want to be thinking through that lens. Now, there are a lot of different ways that we as humans can screw things up, where we can make mistakes and hurt one another. But there are 5 main ways that I want to highlight for us to keep in mind. So one of the ways that spiritual gifts can sort of go wrong, if we want to talk about it in that way, is that people might not know what their gifts are. Some of you may have had that experience where you go through and you say, I don't know what my gifts are, and then you fill out the questionnaire, and you have a 17 as your highest number. Okay. It doesn't mean that you don't have gifts. We know that everybody does, but that may be a point of confusion for you, okay? Another one is that there can be frustration related to styles. If we have a particular way that we are expecting a gift to show up, then that can be an issue of style. And Mary Frances talked about that a couple weeks ago, where we have that idea, this is how it should look. I think the gift of teaching is a perfect example of this, because we can have somebody who is a fantastic 5-year-old teacher, right? Put them in front of a college classroom, and they may not be a happy camper. Same goes the other way. I'm a pediatric psychologist. I can tell you I love stickers and behavior charts and playing games. And some of my adult psychologist colleagues will run from those, but we each have our own styles, right? Okay, so moving on. Another place where gifts can be a source of struggle or pain is when we use them in ways that are not consistent with God's character. So I think leadership is one that we can probably all resonate with this. Leaders who are operating within God's character and how he has called leaders to operate are going to be nurturing and caring for and gently protecting those that they are leading, right? You've probably all had experiences where you've been on a team, whether it's in church or in a workplace, where the leader is more concerned with power and control than they are with nurturing and caring and helping the team function well. So that's one example of where if we're not operating within God's character, we might be using that gift of leadership, maybe not great though, okay? Another one is if we're trying to use gifts that are not really actually given to us. So evangelism is one example that I would love to share with you. So my friend Art Matheny is a pastor out in Oregon, California right now. And Art is a fantastic evangelist. He loves to share Jesus with people. And so you put Art in the middle of a large group of people, he's going to make friends. He loves this. I grew up in a church plant, so I'm familiar with that. Community outreach, man, guys, not my story. I would say as much life as Art gets from being around people and sharing Jesus. When I was a kid growing up in a church plant, that was exhausting. I love Jesus, but for me, being in that environment, really, really tough. And so you may notice some of those things happening in the people around you where they're operating a little bit outside their gifts, maybe not right in line with their calling. Okay, and then the last one is that when gifts are used in a way that God didn't intend, not necessarily used badly, but not as he intended, I'm thinking specifically about Sabbath here. Some of you have been volunteering and using your gifts in the exact same way every single week without a break. That is not how God operates. God created humans to have a break. He created the body to share and to work together. And so when you find yourself feeling tired and weary, it doesn't mean that's not your gift. It just means, maybe this is someplace where God needs to tweak how we're using it. All right, let me move along here. Second part of this is that related to the gifts, we discern together. The gifts are given for the body, and so the body is the best indicator of how we're using the gifts. This requires some really open and honest communication. This requires us to tell one another, oh, I was so blessed by what you did, or thank you for that. This really gives me joy. I really appreciate this. That's really important, okay? Other side of that, when we are feeling tired and worn out, or when we are feeling frustrated or stepped on, that requires us to be able to give the person who's maybe trying to use their gifts in a very human way a little bit of feedback. Newsflash, we have to do this carefully. I don't have time right now to go into a full how do we resolve conflict, but unless we recognize that and unless people can hear, hey, you know what, this doesn't feel right. I'm feeling like this experience really left me feeling stepped on. That's something we need to learn how to do as a community. So honest communication back and forth. Now this might sound super scary because we as, first of all, I would say American evangelicals in general, we really love to focus on that rejoice always verse. And we struggle sometimes with the lament. We struggle sometimes with the fact that Jesus wept before he healed Lazarus. So we can't run straight to the problem solving, and this is uncomfortable. The piece that I want to emphasize, however, is that God uses the broken things in beautiful and surprising ways. Our God is one who has redeemed. Our God is one who has taken mistakes and brokenness, and he has brought healing. And he uses even the mistakes of his people. He uses even the ways that we wound one another when we are willing to invite him in, when we are willing to say, Lord, we don't know what to do, but we think that you want to do something different than what we're doing now. When that happens, there is space for healing, folks, and there is space for the Lord to work in amazing ways. I'm going to stop there. I think this is the time for you now to start thinking and to start talking. I want you to listen to one another. Where are the places of pain and frustration? And I would encourage you not to jump straight towards problem solving. I would also encourage you, this isn't necessarily about just complaining and venting. We need to remember that there's action. The action, folks, is that we might need to think about being more creative. This PSDI would not have happened, okay, if this particular iteration of it wouldn't have happened. Walter and Tony Kim had led LDI. In order for this to happen, guess what? New leaders had to come up. New gifts had to emerge. Are we sad that Walter and Tony are not here? Sure. Is the Lord still doing something really good and beautiful in his people through this? Yes. Yes, he is. I think this is a good example, and I would encourage you to walk fearlessly into those places of pain to explore what God might be doing and calling us to right now. Thank you.